Greetings baseball fans and welcome into another edition of the British Baseball Podcast. I am your host Matthew, and on today's show I'm delighted to be joined by Guildford Mavericks head coach and fellow podcaster Chris Ward, and he treats us to a guide to the Mavericks, and we also discuss in length youth coaching. I guarantee you will not want to miss this one. And just before we get into today's episode, I'd like to thank Graham Busby of Beehive Design for my new logo. I began rebranding and this was my first step. I had a superb response for his work when I put it out there, so if you want some work done for your team or for your own podcast, his information will be in the show notes. Why not check out his portfolio and give him a nudge? And then when we're done in this episode, why not subscribe, review and follow the podcast on the old social medias. You know where I am, at Brit Baseball Pod. And then head over to the new British Baseball Podcast YouTube channel, subscribe there, so when I get my documentaries uploaded, you won't miss out there either. And without further delay, let's get into it. And joining me on today's show, I am pleased to have alongside me the Guildford Baseball head coach, Chris Ward. Parental Advisory, he is a Yankees fan, but we won't be talking about that sort of thing on this show because it is a family-rated podcast. Chris, how are we doing?
I'm great, mate. Well, I was fine until that intro. Wow, that's harsh.
Just on the fly, I've gone a bit off script. I'll edit it out. Maybe I won't. We'll see. I've invited you on today, Chris, to talk about your youth coaching. I've found you on Twitter doing a lot of engaging stuff with the youth within the Guildford Baseball Club, and it really struck with me as quite an interesting piece, like giving the kids homework. But I think before we get into that, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself? How did you get into baseball and how did you get involved with the Guildford Mavs?
Yeah, sure. So I got into baseball originally probably in the late 90s when I first sort of saw it, but not really heavily. And then in 2006, I think, I was over in the States with my dad. He lived in upstate New York, and we were watching some games in his basement, having a whiskey and a chat and learning about the game. And I'd been playing cricket for a few years, and I'd sort of slowly fallen out of love with that anyway. But then all of a sudden, I'd watched some Yankees games and got absolutely hooked on it. The same, my dad taught me the rules over the course of a couple of nights. Came home, found a baseball team to play with, and the rest is history, pretty much.
Great stuff. And the Guildford Mavericks, can you tell us a little bit of the history of the club?
Yeah, sure. So the club originally was not actually in Guildford. So it was originally based in a place down actually around the corner from me now, Wokingham. And they were called the Wokingham Millers. And that was the sort of very first time that the club sort of existed. That was back in 1989. And then from there, they sort of lasted a couple of years and joined with a group of people from Guildford. And then the club as it is now, the sort of Guildford Mavericks, the sort of main team, started in the British Baseball Federation leagues in 1992. So that's the sort of the start of it. And actually, a couple of the guys who were involved in the early days of that are still around, still coaching, not only well, I suppose still playing actually. So one of our coaches, Brian Kendall, has been around since the very early days, and he coaches a lot of the kids as well. One of the most well liked people, I think, in baseball generally, and also he was nominated for one of the BSUK awards for youth awards last year, which is awesome. And then Michael Burdett is another person who was around from the early 90s, and he's the general manager of the club. And he's played on a number of our better teams and continues to coach with us as well. And yeah, it's a pretty awesome club to be part of. We embrace a lot of fun and the social side of things, and you'll see that with our, you'll find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, posting some fun stuff as well as just our baseball stuff.
Excellent. And do you still play for them, or are you just in a coaching role?
Yeah, I still play. As I get older, I'm sort of slotting into a more of a coaching role, but I still love to play, and I don't think I'll ever stop really. I just like helping people, and I like coaching people, and it's what I've done in my sort of professional life for a long time, and it bleeds over really nicely to my personal life.
Lovely. So what can you tell me about coaching the youth at Guildford?
So at Guildford, we have a various different levels. So we have our under 17s, under 15s, under 13s, and under 10s. So we have a fair few different age groups. So it's a bit challenging sometimes to get as many of them playing all at one time as possible. But we usually have in any one season from sort of 60 to 90 players, and they keep us busy across those age groups. And I think one of the things that we're really thankful for is the number of people that get involved and help. So one of the things that we have is, similar to football. If you're a dad who's involved in football or a mum who's involved in football, you go along and you're asked to run the line, or you're asked to help out with the coaching or whatever. And it's people like that we. So we have a great group of mums and dads who help out on game days and at training for that matter, and they help us not just with the training, the coaching, the organisation, but there's some wonderful people who run like shops for us on the day, little tuck shops or a barbecue or something like that, and those kind of things do a wonderful thing for the days, the enjoyment of the day. So then in terms of coaching them, coaching kids is fantastic because they're a lot of the ones that are there are really eager to learn. And with people that are eager to learn, and particularly younger athletes, you find that actually they take on information in a much quicker way. So you can make smaller tweaks quicker, and you can make them better very quick, which just results in them loving the game even more. So it's a lot of fun.
So is it sort of like a Mighty Ducks version, like baseball version of Mighty Ducks that you've got going? Is it like loads of little kids from all over the place just like picking up bats and be like, oh, this is awesome, and taking off to it? Or is it like, you think it's more like a parental influence that's got them involved?
I think it's more parental influence, and actually that sort of helps because we have a few of the sort of the mums and dads who come along. Some of them play on the adult teams as well, but generally they're there to have fun with their kids. And it's because one of the parents has got a history in America, or they've been over in America for a couple of years and enjoyed baseball generally, or they've been to another country and seen it there, and they get involved in it and want their kids to be involved in it. And the thing about baseball is it teaches you some incredible life lessons that are so awesome for children to be learning at that early age. And yeah, I mean, I think a few parents recognize that. They recognize how wonderful the game is. So yeah, it's just great to coach kids generally, in fact.
What would you say is the most rewarding part of coaching the kids?
The energy, the enthusiasm. The energy and enthusiasm the kids bring is wonderful. They aspire to different things than the adults do, so that's a slight difference. And I said that those changes that they can make and take on. But I guess the key thing for me is seeing them go from, it's a really tough game. Hitting a ball with a bat doesn't sound that difficult, but actually in baseball it is very, very difficult, and you're failing 7 times out of every 10 if you're a good player. So seeing kids go from being miserable because they're struggling to hit to they've taken on some advice and they've made a little change, and then all of a sudden they're hitting home runs. There's nothing better than that. Absolutely nothing better. And the other thing for me is I can be a kid again. So you need to be able to coach juniors, particularly under 10s, under 13s. You can't just go in with a coaching mentality of, I'm going to give you the ins and outs and break down your, you talked in previous episodes, Matt, about breaking down your throwing technique and all that sort of stuff. Doesn't really work for kids. So giving them an outcome to achieve and then seeing them achieve that outcome is where they thrive. And again, seeing their smiling when they're doing it, it's absolutely awesome.
And if we asked any of the players to describe you and like what your qualities are as a coach, what do you think they'd say about you?
What I'd like to think that they would say is that he lets me play. So I don't talk a lot. I'll tend to give any of my athletes, I will give them one thing in every session that I'm working on with them to work on. And I won't give them too much, because actually you give an athlete 20 different things to think about, they're only going to be able to focus on one or two, and they're going to get the other 20 things mixed up in their head, and it's not going to work for them. So I'll give them something small, and ideally something that they can digest, and I'll get them to work on that. And again, I just let them play. Give them an outcome, let them achieve the outcome, give them some hints and tips about how to achieve it, but just let them play, particularly kids, because that's all they want to do. Kids want to play, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like we were saying before about football. All do I do is just run around and kick a ball. We can't see it being much different with baseball. It's just nice to see that they're picking up a bat and being enthusiastic for all the right reasons. How would you say the junior game then is different to the adult game that we know and play?
So it's not much different in terms of, I mean, the rules are very similar. The diamond sizes for junior baseball are a little bit smaller depending on the age group. But it's very similar, except for the way that you coach them and the way that you want to achieve those outcomes. And as you go through the age ranges, you need to adjust to those age ranges. So again, you coaching some under 10s is going to be very, very different to how you coach a group of under 18s. So you need to be adaptable to how they're going to deliver what you need. And then you're going to have to work out the best way of communicating with them. And I guess one of the big differences as a coach is that I can tell a kid maybe in 3 or 4 different ways to do something or tweak something, and they will find a way with that. With adults, it's a little bit different. You may have to run through 15 or 20 different ways of saying the same thing for them to grasp the change, because actually their bodies are more used to doing the things that they've been doing their whole life. So if you start playing in your mid-30s, your body is not used to a baseball throw. Your body is not used to swinging a baseball bat. So you need to help adults get used to that approach. And then with adults that have played throughout being a kid and get to an older age, again, the coaching side of things there is largely mental. One of the things we taught in the sessions earlier this year with both the adults and the juniors was that actually our game some people say it's 80% mental and 20% physical. And I asked one of our coaches in the room when we were coaching a group of 40 adults in the pre-season this year, so probably February time. He didn't know the question was coming. I said to him, what percentage of this game do you think is mental as opposed to physical? And he said it's at least 50-50. And I said, so do you spend 50% of your time working on the mental game? Do we spend 50% of our time working on the mental game? And the answer to that question was no. So we spent a little bit of time in that session at least focusing on getting our minds in a situation into a better place to be able to deliver. Because actually, if your mind is right, in the best place for you to do something in the present moment, you can absolutely go and do that. And I've coached people where that's genuinely happened in championship games and things like that. So it's really really wonderful to see.
Yeah, and Will Linton does a lot on the mental side stuff as well. He introduced like meditation and mindfulness into some of his stuff when we were talking about that, and it was fascinating to hear the more mental side of the game.
Absolutely, and when you read about it and understand about it and see some of the coaching details about how you can do this stuff and dig into some of the resources that are there, you can see it's a really popular and really important thing. And to me, Will Linton is a mentor to me. So that's probably where that comes from. I think personally, my father's very into to the mental game, if you're calling it that, as well. So it's ingrained in me in a way. And actually, some of the things that I teach in baseball, I teach at work, and vice versa.
Great stuff. So how are the sort of rules different to the kids game compared to adults game? Is the same number of innings, or is it? We know that the dimensions of the fields are shorter and the diamonds are a bit smaller, but what other differences are there?
You tend to find that the most things that we do in this country are sort of tournament play. So the tournaments have their own sort of specific rules around the diamond sizes, number of innings. So it depends on the type of tournament you're playing, but generally at the youth age, it's more about time limits. So you're not necessarily playing nine innings. You're playing as many innings as you can get in an hour, as an example. Okay. So it's more a time limited game, and actually I think that's a really good way of getting more people into baseball generally, because making sports accessible is really important, and baseball is one of those sports that's actually not as accessible as it could be. So making games, football works in this country and generally because you can go out to a park of an evening and play for an hour and a half, and that's it, job done, game's over. But with baseball, if you're going to play a full 9-inning game in British baseball, you're talking 3 hours. So that's a really, really tough ask, particularly in a lot of situations where we're playing 2 games in a day. We're warming up, we're putting the field up, putting it down. It's a whole day. And actually, one of the things that we need to do as a sport is make sure that the game is accessible. And I think having shorter games or having more accessible, quicker versions of the game will make a really big difference to the number of participants in the sport, to be honest. Yeah,
I agree. Are you still in touch with the kids throughout the lockdown? If you are, how are you sort of keeping their morale and spirits up, and what sort of things are you asking them to do whilst in isolation to stay active and prepared?
That's a great question. We do quite a lot. As I said, we're quite a social club anyway, so we do a fair amount as it is. We have a few WhatsApp groups for the adult teams, and we have WhatsApp groups for the junior teams as well. So they're always chatting on there and sharing what they're doing. But at the moment, we've got a club-wide forum on Facebook where we have all of the parents on board, or as many as the parents as we can on board, all the adult players on board. And what we're doing is I'm personally sharing something every single day. On that, whether it's a video or something like that. It's mainly been videos so far of me doing little bits and pieces at home so that I can show them what I'm doing so that they can then copy it, or it's other players showing me what they're doing. So some of them come to me on WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever, and they'll send me a video, and I'll then help them out. So today I had a video chat with one of the players about 2:30 this afternoon. He wanted to know a little bit more about pitching, took him through that, and he's going to send me some more videos later on. So I'm able to do a lot of that coaching over the internet now, which is awesome. The stuff I'm sharing on Facebook is just little snippets every day, the things you can do at home. So things that I've been doing. A lot of our players do have screens and nets to throw into because we share out some of the equipment, so that helps. So I'm throwing some stuff out there, some different things that we would normally do, playing some games. And then what can you do around the house? So one of the things that I'll put out is about socks. You can roll up a pair of socks into a ball. You can use that as, if you're a catcher, it's perfect for a catcher. Set up in your stance, get your brother or your sister or your mum to throw a pair of socks at you really hard, and you block it or you catch it or whatever. It's fun things you can do at home. And then the other things is other sort of fun activities that aren't necessarily baseball related, but actually help with baseball. So one of the ones that I'm going to put up, but I haven't yet, will be a video of me juggling really badly because I suck at juggling. But what better way to grow your hand-eye coordination than juggling? So I'm just going to challenge them. And actually, the part of the reason for me saying that to you now is to make sure that I actually go ahead and do that over the next couple of days, because I've been putting it off.
It's committed to audio now, and I'm not going to edit it out, so you're going to have to show me.
So that's what we're doing, and it's yeah, I'm hoping it's working, and a few people are getting involved. And it certainly does look like it is. It's certainly got a few people sending me messages, sending me videos, and helping me. And actually, that's partly how I got to play for the Mavericks in the first place. So back in 2010, I think I was with Bracknell Baseball Club, and I was struggling to love the game with them. And I sort of got to a place where I didn't think I was going to carry on. I'd only been playing for sort of 2 or 3 years. And I got in touch with a coach who I knew from Canada, who'd come over with he had a kids team that came over and played in Bracknell. And his name was Wayne Dale Johnson. And he was just the most enthusiastic baseball fan generally, but also mainly a Dodgers fan, and he was hardcore into his Dodgers, and even in 2010, I was sending him videos of me throwing and hitting, because he said, you need to keep on playing, Chris. You're one of the people that's going to be really good for the game. You need to keep playing. And I didn't really believe him, to be honest, but I sent him the videos, and he helped me get better, and eventually pushed me into going and talking to Guildford and going and playing for them.
Do you prefer coaching the kids over the adults, or is it a bit of a 50-50 split? And this isn't designed to stitch you up for any of your adults that are listening or any of the kids that are listening. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you think there's something that the adults could learn from the kids sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the plans I had around this year was a bit of crossover, a bit of competition actually between some of the juniors and some of the adults. Not sure how that will come to fruition yet, but I'm hoping it will. But yeah, absolutely. So the coaching adults, as I said, is very, very different to how you coach a 9 or 10-year-old. So you have to go on this sort of journey with them, depending on how old they are, and you have to relate to them and understand how they are going to take on information. And you know, it is a real challenge either way. Do I prefer one or the other? I mean, when kids get that result that they really want, they get that home run that they hit, or they strike that batter out, they tend to be so much more enthusiastic about it. They will jump up and scream and smile, and you will really be able to see it. Whereas with adults, that's not as obvious sometimes. So from that point of view, that I guess I enjoy the being a kid and being around the kids. But equally, you know, I still love playing, I still love winning, and I still love the feeling of it. So being around adults who are interested in playing, interested in getting better every day, and being part of a winning team is also fantastic. So yes, there is definitely differences between the two. Do I prefer one or other? Not really. I love coaching. I love helping people get better, no matter who they are.
Lovely, great stuff. So is there any do you see much conflict or any sort of issues at junior level? Not necessarily between the kids themselves, but is it like a parental thing that maybe somebody, I mean, you see it with like Sunday league football, where you see parents shouting on the sideline.
It's very rare, to be honest. I think there is an ugly side to it, yes. And that is sometimes when parents or coaches expect and push juniors too hard and too far, and expect the outcomes. You know, the outcome for them should be something that they enjoy doing, and B, that they constantly get better at. But actually, sometimes for adults, the big W at the end of a game is the big all important thing. And that's, whilst it is massively important, it's not something that I'm massively wedded to. I much prefer athletes and adults as well. I much prefer people to have fun, because if you have fun, you're more likely to learn, you're more likely to come back, you're more likely to get better. So there is definitely that side to it, but I don't see it all that often. I can tell you a story from when I also umpire. I've umpired for the last sort of 6 or 7 years, and I don't mind doing that occasionally. And again, umpiring for kids is more for me is a little bit more gratifying than with adults, because they're a little bit more respectful generally. But I do remember a game where I was umpiring. I think they were under 13s, and there was a young kid who was a catcher, and he was tiny, very, very small guy. And his mum was right behind me and right behind him. And every pitch he caught or every bat he swung, she was shouting and screaming at him. And he was in the middle of the game, turning around like through me and shouting at her. And for me, that stuck with me as probably one of the worst memories I have of junior baseball. Was this kid was so was being forced almost against his will to be good as a catcher, to make every single play the most important thing ever. That in that game he was on base and he came running home from third base, and got tagged out at home. He was out by a country mile, but because his mum was right there and screaming at him and whatnot, he got up and started shouting and screaming at me, and then at his mum, and broke into tears. And I mean, that's just horrible. That's just horrible. So I guess if I'm going to say anything about the nasty side of that, is it that kind of thing will push people away from the game. It won't drive people to be better. It will drive people to be bitter. So I guess my message from that would be just let them have fun, particularly at that age.
Is that how you sort of measure your success in it at junior level?
So there's a number of ways that I measure that. And the first thing is in smiles. Absolutely. 100%, particularly at the lower ages. Particularly they keep coming back. You talked about homework earlier. I set a bunch of kids' homework, and the big, I tweeted about some of it. I put some of it up on Twitter, and the thing that shocked me was that loads of the kids did it. Loads of the kids loved doing it, and they really, really thought about it. And that for me was a measure of success. That these kids have genuinely gone away and thought about it, and they've learned something new about the game by doing it. They enjoyed doing it, and I absolutely loved seeing that. So yeah, I measure success generally for the juniors in smiles, the way that they develop. But that said, you do go into things like the mechanics of pitching, the mechanics of hitting and defense. So what I look for from the juniors is for them to progress with the quality that they're producing at bats, so that they're getting better every time, that they're seeing as many pitches as they can, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of really, really important. And again, as you go through the age groups, you can give them plans to execute throughout the games, it's them executing the plan. And as much as I said about driving for an outcome, you do want to be driving for an outcome, but actually teaching them a process that allows them to get to that outcome, and recognizing the fact that you might teach that process, but as I said before, you might only achieve success in that process 3 times out of every 10. And that's something that baseball is incredible for teaching life lessons. You are going to fail 70% of the time, and you are still going to be one of the best players in the game. And you need to be able to cope with failure. So it teaches kids at an early age to be able to cope with failure. And that's another measure of success, is how well people respond to if I'm pitching, I've just pitched a ball, it's gone wide, it's not where I wanted it to go. How do they react on the mound if they do that? How do they react if they swing a bat at a ball that's miles high in the air and the catcher has to jump for it? How do they react to that? And again, that comes back to the mental game. So just really important things that you can plan for, review regularly without actually even talking to the kids about it, but you can measure it.
Do you think burnout's a risk at youth level?
No.
Lovely. Next.
There's a really good reason behind that, Matt, and the reason is we don't play enough. So when we go to practice, we go to practice for 2 hours, maybe on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, and then we'll play a game on a Sunday, as an example. We will likely get I don't know, 4 to 5 hours with kids in every week, whereas in baseball in the US they're playing 3, 4, 5 times a week. So burnout's absolutely not a problem. And one of the important things that Will teach, that I totally agree with, is throwing often is absolutely the most important thing that you can do, and getting practice in and getting reps in as much as you can, because baseball's a lot about repetition. So the more repetition you can get, the better you're going to get, the quicker you're going to get it. And that's why we in the UK aren't able to produce as many baseball players on the international level as we'd like, because we're only playing a couple of times a week. And some of the stuff that Will and Liam do with their academy work is incredible, and that bridges a gap and makes these players into people who can go to college in the States and be really successful, and possibly have a really good shot at getting into the show.
Do any of the kids sort of have any aspirations to play at the highest level? I mean, I'm guessing they've all seen the heroes on TV and want to do it.
They have their heroes. So bits of the homework that I set them was, tell me about your 3 favorite players. Who's your favorite pitcher? Who's your favorite hitter? And who's your favorite position player? Tell me all about them. I want to know. Why do you like them? And I got a few responses that were from the more senior members of the team that broke it down into, I like this guy because he pitches incredible. He strikes out everybody, and these are his numbers. And I got stats from these kids. It was incredible. And then others were, I like this guy because he plays on the New York Yankees. I like this guy because he plays on the Red Sox. And that's just equally as good, because they're just getting into it. Do I think that – I think the younger kids, probably under sort of 14, maybe under 13, something like that, probably don't have those aspirations quite yet. Depends on how they've been brought up and how much baseball they've watched. But certainly as you get into teenage years, you start to see the kids understanding the players more and affiliating themselves with those players. Yeah, absolutely. I think those dreams are born around about that time. That said, I can't imagine a single adult baseball player in this country who doesn't have a player that they want to emulate. So they want to look like some of their favorite players. And why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? So you might still have, I mean, those kids might have aspirations to go and play in the majors. They might just have, well, their parents might have aspirations for them to go and play college in the States and get some experience from it. Because again, you open that up. I mean, that's incredible. You play baseball from an early age in this country, and you open up the opportunity to go to America and go to school over there, and go to college over there, and get it funded for you because you're good at what you do. I mean, what great opportunities there are. And some of the English kids are absolutely taking those opportunities on, and there's certainly a few of them in the college and junior high systems at the moment, and it's great to see. So I just hope that with the development in coaching that's going on over the last sort of certainly 5 to 10 years, that we'll get more coaches in the UK that will enable that sort of way of working, that development of players, and we'll get to a point where you do have these kids at 7, 8 years old saying, right, I want to be in the show, I want to work every day, I want to take ground balls every day, I want to be throwing every day. And that's a really good way of getting people into the game and being really successful. But as I said, adult wise, I would expect you have got a favourite player who you want to be like. Who's your man, Matt?
At the moment, well, it's weird because when I first started watching baseball, the first guy that sort of got into it was Alex Rodriguez, and you'll know him, but I'm talking about Seattle A-Rod and Ken Griffey Jr. Yeah, before he sold his soul. Those are the players that I started watching when I first got into like properly being able to see baseball.
Yeah.
because it's
And tell
Channel
me,
5 viewing. But then as I sort of came back into it, I'm looking at players like Fernando Tatis Jr., Nolan Arenado. I keep calling him Arena Do because I'm from Bolton. Just read it as I see it.
Arena Do. I like Arena Do. That sounds like he should have a nice 80s style on his head.
Yes. But there's loads of, like, I think I've just got like favorite players in different positions. But because I don't really have a position, I'm not even on the team yet. I say I might even make the team. I'm just really enjoying training before it got cut short. I just want to play.
Yeah, you will. But then like I said, there's the Ken Griffeys, there's the A-Rods, and like, don't tell me that when you have been taking batting practice, there hasn't been a moment when you've thought, I'm in Safeco Field. I'm Ken Griffey. I can do this, and everyone does it. Absolutely, everyone does it, and it's fantastic. And why not? Why not have dreams? Absolutely, and that's what keeps us doing this and keeps us playing.
Exactly, and I found that from watching these players as well, from having no real playing experience before, I've been able to pick up some really interesting tips on how they sort of position themselves. I did the same when I was playing ice hockey. One of the coaches, when I started playing ice hockey, asked me how I learned to sort of skate backwards and position myself, and it's from a video game. Whereas I've taken that now and I just sort of studying like tape on YouTube, watching players, just how the like Nolan stood off his third base positioning for different things, taking that into practices with me. If I'm asked to play on third, if I'm asked to play at second, if I'm asked to play shorts, or if I'm asked to play centre field, just taking what the coaches are teaching me and then watching what they do at the same time to try and make my own mind up and see how I can make my own decisions. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, totally it does. I mean, and that's another great thing that people can be doing right now, when we're all locked in and we're all starved of baseball. I mean, MLB TV are showing pretty much. I think if you've got a subscription or can get a subscription to MLB TV, they're showing or leaving open the last two seasons' games. If you type a specific game and a date into YouTube, you'll be able to find the games and watch them. And generally, I find that the position of the camera tends to be slightly left of shortstop, and you can see the picture from the shortstop position, and you can be watching the game. And I've seen people doing this, watching the game in their front room, getting ready as if they're in the infield with just watching the game, and that's a great bit of repetition to have to get ready for a pitch, to jump when there is when something's happening, and move to the right direction when the ball's hit, that sort of stuff. And you can absolutely do that still indoors, and I would advocate that as well.
Cracking. So which players did you aspire to?
Derek Jeter, number 2. Derek Jeter. When I got into it in the first place, he just started playing, and then when I got really heavily into it in sort of mid to late 2000s, obviously they had been without a championship for a while, got A-Rod had come along and stuff like that, and Jeter was the captain, and he was the first baseball jersey that I ever got, and if I'm emulating anyone, it's going to be him, and absolutely, I'm telling you that you're definitely emulating Ken Griffey or A-Rod. I'm absolutely trying to emulate to Derek Jeter.
Nice one. So let's move on to some listener questions. We've had a couple that have been submitted. Two of these, I believe you know quite well. Your fellow podcast hosts. We've got Rooney would like to know, what is your most embarrassing plate appearance?
Well, I genuinely can't think of one that I've had that's embarrassing, just purely because of the thing that I talked about the mental game, and I've always been pretty hot on it. So first of all, there aren't any embarrassing at-bats. They're all amazing. And as Kev quite rightly says, that's a lie. I've definitely had some bad ones. But what you do when that happens is you wipe it off. You forget about it and you move on to the next thing. Because if you don't, it eats you up. And then you can't make the play in the infield that you need to make, and you can't focus on your next at bat. So, and that's one thing that I loved about baseball as opposed to cricket. In cricket, you can wait half a day in a field, go back and have some tea, and then go out to bat and be back in the pavilion sitting with your feet up straight away, and that's it. That's your day done. But whereas with baseball, you can get up to the plate, you can fail, and you can go and sit back down, and then you can make an amazing play in the field, and then you can hit a home run, and then you can go the rest of the day and suck. But it doesn't matter, because you know that there's another opportunity coming next inning. The next inning, you've got another opportunity. So for me, don't remember any, Kev, is the answer.
And you're the podcast host, Rob. Is there any money in the Mike Fiers tribute scene? Would you like to tell us a little bit what that could possibly be? Because to me and I bet everyone listening, that's a bit cryptic.
It is a bit. So on the podcast, so I do a podcast with those two guys and a couple of others. We have a pool of us. We're all Yankees fans. It's called The Empire Strikes Back, and it's about just Yankee stuff generally, although that's changed quite recently. And I don't know why Mike Fiers came up, but he came up in one of the episodes, and I had mentioned the fact that I have just an irrational hatred for the guy. I didn't like him. I just genuinely didn't like him from the interviews that he'd done, from the way that he acted, that sort of stuff. And there's a few players in baseball that I feel like that, and everyone's got their, we talked about it earlier, you've got your heroes, but you've also got your villains, and for me, he was one of those. And there was one day that he had his beard shaved to look like he had a monkey's tail, and if you haven't seen it, you need to see the picture. It is the most ridiculous thing ever, and we were having a bit of a laugh about it, and they were comparing me, the way I look, to him, which greatly upset me, Rob, if I'm honest, and it's ruined my my self-esteem ever since.
I'm actually quite envious of your beard, because one, I don't like it's got any ginger bits in it. I'm not gingerist. I'm just saying I do have some copy in mine, and I'm very proud of it. But it fills in everywhere. If you can't see it, I'm actually looking at Chris on Skype. There's no gaps. There's no patches. It looks like he could do something really artistic with his facial hair. And anyone that can do that, I'm extremely envious of.
It's entirely possible, mate, but there is patches in it, and the patches are white, unfortunately. That's just I lost my hair a long time ago, and now my beard's growing white. It's not a good look, and I don't want to be without a beard. I've got no chin.
Brilliant. Friends of the show, Stephen and his son Kimmy. I believe Kimmy plays for the Guildford team. Can you ask Chris, now that the start of the season has been delayed and possibly won't happen, how badly would it impact on Junior's development with not having game time? Many thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, it's tough. Not having game time is a pain, but it's a massive opportunity. And it links back to what we were talking about earlier, Matt. We don't play enough. We don't play enough games. And if we're lucky, we get 1 or 2 games in a week, or we have 1 game day a week. It's not enough. We are currently in a situation where we're locked at home, or we get an hour to go out of our house every day and get some exercise. Now, we're very fortunate, I think, that most of us have a garden to throw in or whatever. Some of us don't. And again, I would encourage those that don't have a garden to use that hour a day. Go and seek out your local cricket club, because actually I've got 2 really close to me, and that's one of the other things I'll do on our Facebook group, actually, is show me throwing in there. There's a local. You will have a local cricket club that has nets. Go and use them, because nobody else is right now. You can go and use them. Go and hit into them if you've got a bat and a ball. Go and throw into them if you've got a ball and a glove, or even just a ball. So the opportunities to get out and throw and hit right now are incredible. So in answer to the question, I think if we treat it as an opportunity to have our young players playing every day, throwing every day, hitting every day, there's absolutely no loss whatsoever. And emulate it. Go out on a Saturday, if it's a normal game day, emulate a game. Go out with your son and get him to have 4 at-bats. Go out with your son, get him to pitch 7 innings, however many it's going to be. Go out with your catcher and get him to go through a load of drills, and then you throw balls at him. You get him to catch a 7-inning game, as an example. So you can do that every day right now, because most people are stuck inside not doing a great deal. I mean, I'm in the situation where I'm a key worker, and actually most of my day is spent working, unfortunately. So there's very little I can do from that point of view. But over the next few days, where we've got a few days off, I'm going to be doing it. I had holidays this year planned. My holidays were the London series for a start. I was going to take a week off around the London series to do some coaching and to go to the games and probably just have some fun afterwards as well. I am in May. I was due to do some training. One of the things I'm doing is I'm supposed to be doing in October is climbing Mount Kilimanjaro for the Mental Health Foundation. That's still supposedly going ahead, but I sincerely doubt that we'll get there this year. And so that was 2 weeks out. There's another holiday due. I was hoping to go to the Edinburgh Festival this year. So that's 4 weeks of holiday that I've just got back. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to take a few days off, and I'm going to just go and do what I've just said. Go and throw some pitches in a cricket net somewhere. Go and hit some balls in a cricket net. I'm going to take my son and my daughter and get them doing it. They've both been doing it out in the garden with me in the last couple of days because I've been doing it. So yeah, the opportunity right now to learn some new drills and get better and get ready for the season when it does happen is fantastic. So I don't think it has to be a drawback at all, Matt. I think if we use the time wisely, it can be a really great benefit to everyone if they're getting out there and working on it.
Cracking. What a great answer. Steve, I hope that helps. So Chris, before I let you go, something you mentioned before about the homework. I remember when I was at school, I hated homework, and sport was my release and what I really look forward to, because there's like no homework. But you've introduced homework into sport that they love. Is that of years of watching horror movies, or where did the idea come up for giving kids homework in baseball?
Yeah, do you know what? The idea came up so I do some coaching with Matt Crawshaw at Team UK, which is the coach pitch. So for under 10s, so my son goes and plays in that academy, and I've done some coaching with them and stuff. And we were talking one day, probably back end of last year, I think, about the gaps. So there's a big gap between the times that these kids can get together because it's a UK wide thing, and so we get together once a month if we're lucky, and obviously at the moment we don't. So it's really difficult to sort of understand what the kids are doing. They're working with their clubs and whatnot, but actually, what else can Team UK be doing? And we were just throwing some ideas around as coaches. I said back end of last year, and I'd just finished writing a template for a book report for my son because he didn't like the book report that came home from school. So I made him a more complicated one. And it literally came from that. I saw the template and went, do you know what? This would work just to ask some really simple baseball questions. So I changed the template, and the template basically said, who's your favorite character in the book? But I changed it to who's your favorite pitcher, who's your favorite catcher, that sort of stuff. And some of the questions were about, for the younger kids, for us to help us as coaches get a bit of an understanding of what they knew about the game as well. So can you draw a baseball diamond and draw the players where they should be, that sort of stuff. So whilst it was homework, it wasn't necessarily really homework. It was more interesting stuff for them to really look at and try and really understand. So we did that with Team UK, and then we set up this year with Guildford Juniors. We'd set up the process whereby the sort of first 4 weeks of the season were sort of, well, not the season, but the pre-season was sort of early January, beginning of February. And then we had a 2-week gap where we had half term. So we didn't have any training either side of half term, which is great for the parents, me being one of them. So that helped me. So there was a gap there of a couple of weeks, and in that gap, I decided actually I'm going to throw in the same kind of homework for the Guildford guys. And so for the younger group, I did the same sort of stuff as we did with the under 10s, and with the older group, I asked them a little bit more challenging questions, things like describing like describe their favorite play that they've seen on YouTube or MLB TV. Tell me what it is. Tell me all about it. That sort of stuff. And then when we actually got back into training with the juniors, one of the first things we did was we played a game that week that we got the homework back, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. I didn't think I'd get anyone give me any response to this homework, and I got 6 or 7 of the kids had given me this homework, and it was all brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I've shared some of it on Twitter, and I'll continue to do so because the answers they gave were fantastic. But one of the things we did was we played a game indoors, and I like to change up the games indoors, particularly for the kids, to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more challenging than baseball generally. And this particular time I said, right, the winner of this game will be the team or the players that come up with the best, most inventive fielding play. It's not about scoring runs. We set up the diamond the way we would normally inside, but I want to see cartwheels and throws behind the back, all the exciting stuff that you've seen in your videos that you've done for your homework and stuff like this. And they did it, and it was awesome. It was great fun to watch. It's great fun to be part of. The kids really loved it. But yeah, just going back to the homework, I had 2 sets of homework for the two sort of age groups, if you like, and was just massively impressed by the response that I got. And it really wasn't homework. I badged it as homework, which may have actually been a bit of a detriment, actually. So there's some of the kids that I'm disappointed that they didn't respond. I think probably because I called it homework, and maybe I'll do it differently next time. But I absolutely loved the response. The kids seemed to love doing it. And then because they did so well doing it, and I asked for their favourite players, I got it back. And the next week that I came back to training, I brought all the results back, and I said, you've all got A's. They were amazing homework. And for everyone who did, I called up each of the people who gave me the homework, and I gave them baseball cards of the players that they said were their favourites.
Brilliant.
Mate, it was fantastic. And again, you go back to why we do this, the smiles on their faces when they win a game because they did a cartwheel and made an accurate throw, or because they get a baseball card of their favorite player because they did 5 minutes of homework with their mum or their dad to understand the game better. There's no better way, mate. Can't tell you how much fun that is.
What a great way to engage with the kids. Brilliant. Well, that's superb. I don't think I've heard of anything like that before. I mean, well, if I'd been given that as homework when I was a kid, I'd still be equally as mad at maths, but, at least I'd be having fun. And cracking.
So one of the kids was doing maths. Like, one of the kids, I think he's, I want to say 12, maybe a little bit older than that. But he gave me all the stats of his favourite players. I like Garrett Cole because this was his season last year. He gave me all of their stats, and he knew all of what they meant, and that's incredible.
And that brings us to the end of the show. I always like to leave the last word to the guests, so it's an open floor. Is anything you want to shout out, or anything you want to, any people you want to give mentions to?
Not much from me, Matt, really. I guess you touched on Will Linton earlier, and we talked a bit about the fact that he's been a mentor to me, as has Liam Carroll over the last few years, and I don't get anywhere. And a couple of the other sort of GB coaches as well, Drew Spencer, J-Rod, who's just been announced as the under-18s coach. I'm learning from these guys all the time, and without their input, and without quite a few other coaches' input, actually, and bouncing ideas off them. Rhino's another one. George Brager from Bristol's another. Without those guys' input, I do not get the job of being a head coach at Guildford. So I'm extremely thankful to those guys. Other things to shout about are obviously find me on Twitter, Free Reign UK, at Free Reign UK. Find Guildford Mavericks on Twitter at Guildford Mavs, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook, and we post a lot of fun stuff. And just as we started getting locked in fact, I don't know if you saw it, Matt, but we put out a video where we had loads of players from our club just throw into each other, but we were all indoors. So if you get a chance to have a look at that, that's worth a look.
Yeah, we'll do.
And
then, where can we find your podcast as well?
Yeah,
what
the podcast. It's on Spreaker, but you can find it on iTunes. It's called The Empire Strikes Back. You're better off finding us on Twitter, which is at TESB UK. So The Empire Strikes Back UK, and that's our sort of the UK Yankees podcast. There's a group of us that do just chat generally, but more recently, because we've been locked in, we've been doing some fantastic interviews with people. So Tuesday night I did an interview. It will go out next week on the 15th of April, which is Jackie Robinson Day. We had an interview with Bob Kendrick, who is the owner and curator of the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, and that guy can tell a story. And so we had him on. We've had some various minor league owners on, and we've got a few more coming up. We've had some writers, so some baseball writers. So Brian Hoke is the Yankees beat writer. We had the first part of our interview with him went out last week. The second part of that will go out tomorrow. And we're just doing loads of interviews with people. We had Joey Mellows, the baseball Brit, on to talk about cups of tea and biscuits.
Yeah, that was an enthralling episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Still not happy that the malted milk doesn't get enough love. It's worrying. I'll begin to like you as well, and
yeah, it's a garbage biscuit, and the one of the things we did was try and link biscuits to teams. And actually, Helen, one of the contributors to The Empire Strikes Back, also writes for Batflips and Nerds, and she posted something today. So that we were recording on the 9th of April, and she posted something today about some of those names that we gave. And I don't know if malted milk came up. Did it come up in there? But if it didn't, it would be the Tampa Bay Rays. I think massively disappointing when they could be awesome.
Unbelievable. I can't believe what I'm hearing.
I can see you weeping. This
interview is getting cut off 20 minutes short.
But yeah, so that podcast, I love doing that. It's just a group of us having fun, and we do have fun, and then we get to interview these incredible people. And I cannot tell you how much fun Bob Kendrick from the Negro League Museum is. One, if you are into baseball generally and you haven't explored the Negro Leagues yet, the one for you, Matt, maybe. Mm-hmm. Check it out. The stories are incredible. The players have amazing names, have amazing sort of theatre around them. The magic of that time you cannot recreate, and it's very difficult to, you can't find any videos, so you have to imagine it. It's fantastic. So there's some really good books out there, and like I say, some of the things you hear about Leroy Satchel Paige, one of the greatest pitchers in the world. What's ever seen. Elston Howard was the guy we talked about a lot because he was a Hall of Fame Yankee, and then there's loads of others as well that had just amazing baseball history and baseball acumen, and the stories that you get out of that is out of the Negro League baseball history is just they're just incredible. So yeah, if you haven't explored that, the interview we do with Bob Kendrick that we launch, I think it's, let's say, on Jackie Robinson Day next week, will be a great start for you.
Cracking. I'll try and put some links to that in the show notes as well, so that people can find it, because it sounds really interesting. And that's it. That brings us to a close. I'd like to thank Chris again for your time today. That's really insightful. Really enjoyed the interview today, and I wish you all the best of luck with the youth training, and also when the season starts for the Guildford Mavs.
Starts, mate.
Yeah, when it starts, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate you having me on.
Take care, top lad.
Cheers.
Ta-ra. And there you have it. What a great insight into youth coaching there from Chris. I'd like to thank him again for his time. An absolute blast talking to him before, after, during the show, and even listening back to this when editing it was just brilliant. I enjoyed every minute of it. So, what's coaching like at your club? Do you do anything with your kids down there? Let us know. Drop us a tweet or send us a message on the Facebook page, and we'll have a discussion about them. But until next time, stay safe, stay distant. Ta-ra.